Hi, welcome back. This is Andrew Sears again with the next lesson focusing on the first step of the ADDIE process analysis. And I'm going to give an overview of how to do course needs assessment, how to do research for your course, and how that's going to tie in with planning. So the basic model I'm going to be using is what you're really trying to do is to develop your course outcomes, your course assessments, and then after that, content. That's the idea behind backward design. And in doing that, you're going to have several parts of the needs analysis process. So one part is you're going to be looking at the internal stakeholder needs and their priorities. So that's going to be the organizational mission, the organizational objectives, get faculty input, and then you have to think about your program learning outcomes for a degree. That would be the learning outcomes for the degree. So that's step one. In each of these steps, we're going to be providing you with a template, and the numbers on these steps will correspond to the numbers in the template. It's a Google Doc template that you can use to do this. The second is going to be looking at external stakeholder needs. So that's the needs of students and the needs of employers. Often schools will use an advisory board. It's helpful to also look at standards if you're in a field that has industry standards. And then the next area, and it actually skipped to 4, but let me go to 3. 3 is going to be learning from the field. So often you're developing courses that in fairly established fields, and you might research comparable course syllabi, or even if you're creating something new, often I'll do an interdisciplinary course that's integrating 2 fields, and I'll look at the syllabi of adjacent courses. And then you can compile the outcomes from those, look at textbooks, look at what topics they cover. Now, you're not going to be trying to just replicate those, but you want to know what's out there. And then the last step is going to be to research the content and technology availability. So what books are out there, what videos, what articles, and what OER is out there. And as I mentioned, each of these steps is going to be a part of an assignment that you're going to be building on across 3 weeks, where you're going to have a Google Doc where you pull together all these materials in your analysis for course needs, research, and brainstorming. On the first one, though, I want to go a little bit deeper before I get into the Google Doc, just to explain some of the theory. So there's a hierarchy, and there's a theory of assessment and the idea behind backward design. I want to kind of tie all those concepts together. So within each institution, everything has to fall within the mission. So whenever you go for accreditation, they're going to say, how does this fall within the mission for everything you do? Underneath the mission, you're going to have institutional outcomes. And under the institutional outcomes, you're going to have program level outcomes. So each level needs to fit within the scope of the level above it. So if it's outside your mission or it's outside your institutional outcomes, then there's a problem. And then you need to have outcome measures to prove that the outcomes above it were achieved. So the idea, this is almost like a logical proof. So how did you know that you achieved your mission or you achieved your institutional outcomes? Well, you can show that you had program learning outcomes that helped achieve those institutional outcomes. And then how did you achieve your program learning outcomes? Well, you're going to have course learning outcomes, CLOs, that will tie to signature assessments. And then how do you know you achieved your course level outcomes? You're going to have unit level outcomes, or lesson or module, whatever term you prefer. It varies across various countries. And for each of those, you're going to have assessments. And this is a logical proof, so that your assessments show that your unit level outcomes were reached. And usually for a course, you're going to have something that's called a signature assessment or a summative assessment that you can tie back in, and all this will fit into kind of the logic model that you're using for assessment. So it's important to understand the big picture. Part of the idea behind this is that backward design means that you do your outcomes first, then you do your assessment, then you do your content. And the idea is you don't want to just take a textbook and say, I'm going to cover everything in the textbook. The idea is that you want to cover what people need to do for their assessment. So in building this course, the assessment is for you to actually design a course. So we are trying to focus the content around all of that. So To go a little deeper on program learning outcomes, PLOs, they go from the institutional level outcomes, and they need to be clearly defined and measurable. They should be attainable, and they should include the development of skills, job-related training, impartation of knowledge and information, and the training and the application of knowledge and skills. And that's what accreditors are going to be looking for at the program level or degree level. And then the course level outcomes should describe what learners should be able to know or do at the conclusion of a course. They include, not only what they're able to do, but under what conditions. They are going to support the mastery of the program level objective, and they need to map up to that. So this is an example of a map that you might have showing both, say you have 8-week courses, and what this is going to show is it's going to show how your various courses will map to the various outcomes. So you have these programs, and these really should say PLOs up here, and each course needs to map, and then you'll have letters that go to those. So and they can map to assessment. So another example of this would be you have your curriculum map, and you have each course, and you'll say, is this where you're going to introduce the concept or develop? And sometimes you'll use reinforce and R, and then mastery. Sometimes that'll also be assessed. And this is an example of a curriculum map, and again, that's something that's used for accreditation. Now, one other thing that I want to kind of talk you through is to actually go through this, an overview of this analysis sheet. So we're going to have a Google Doc that's going to be a part of the assignment. I'm just going to give you a quick overview. You're going to go through this for each of the first 3 weeks. Each of these steps corresponds to the 1, 2, 3, 4 and the diagram that I had for this lesson. And an example of some of the things you might fill out, this is actually what we use for this course. So this is the overview. It's just explaining these 4 steps mapped to the 4 things. And for each of these steps, in designing this course, we did step 1, needs analysis. What's going to be different about this course? So, one of the main things that's different about this course is we're creating a free MOOC, but the idea is if someone wanted to take essentially the same course and submit the assessments for grading, they could do that, and they could get credit for it. It's going to be very pragmatic, and we're going to focus a lot more on free resources in course design, with the assumption that the audience is very resource constrained. And then, I talk about the audience. So who's your intended audience? And, you can read that in this course. What are we hoping students will get out of this? And then in the learning from the field, we looked at 5 different syllabi. From those syllabi, we copied some of the learning outcomes out of it. We and then we thought about those, and if you look at their learning outcomes and ours actually look quite a bit different than theirs, but they gave us ideas to think about, saying, did we actually cover this thing and that we may actually want to cover? So in one word of warning is sometimes you'll get syllabi that are really bad. Sometimes their outcomes will not follow best practices. So don't just copy what's out there. Obviously that's not ethical and violates copyright, but don't just assume that what you're modeling on is a good example. And then, from here, we created a brainstorm of outcomes. We looked at, what are the most popular texts that people are using. And then, you can look on Amazon.com for text. And then you can purchase, look at how do you get instructor copies of books and things along those lines. So I'll talk about this assignment in more detail in the next session where I discuss the assignment and how to fill that out. Thanks a lot.